Now, one of the things that I think many people have not paid attention to this season is that conservatives have a new dog whistle issue. Last year, it was critical race theory, which they kind of just invented out of the blue as the new boogeyman to scare white people to show up at the polls. Before that, it was BLM, Black Lives Matter, to, of course, scare white people and force them to show up at the polls. We see this again and again and again. Conservatives find new acronyms to dehumanize and to take the spotlight away from what they're actually trying to achieve with these dog whistle issues. When you're talking about BLM, it's easier to say BLM than Black Lives Matter, because you don't want to come out on television or as a political candidate and say Black lives don't matter. Now, that might be what you mean, but you don't want to say that. So you'll say we have to stop BLM. That's a whole lot easier for people to digest and to get your point across than saying that we have to stop Black lives from mattering. We saw the same thing with critical race theory. If you simply said, well, we want to stop black children from having their history taught in schools, we want to make sure that we keep teaching the same propaganda that does not scare or upset white children, well, then that's a little bit difficult to get across in a 30-second ad. But if you say we have to stop CRT from indoctrinating our children, you're achieving the same point. You're saying the same thing. The only difference is you're couching it in a different way. You're taking humanity out of it. You're changing it from what it was into what you want it to be. Say what you want about President Trump, and many of us do, and I do also. But President Trump is a master at marketing. He's a master at media manipulation. He's a master at branding. He's able to speak at a second and third grade level that most Americans can understand, no matter what part of the country. This is why we see this investiture in him. People believe that he is speaking directly to them because he can speak on a level that all of them can understand. And this is why he has done such a good job at branding and co-opting movements and changing the way that people think about them, because he's able to, in the forefront, inject his own propaganda into it, as opposed to talk about the depths of the issue. Now, what we're seeing right now, this is again happening in the Republican primary, on this issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, are the new boogeyman, DEI. You'll see every single conservative news anchor right now talking about the dangers of DEI. This idea that somehow white students and white employees are being discriminated against because these DEI efforts are giving unqualified black people their jobs, unqualified black people their places in schools, unqualified black people an opportunity. And so they've made DEI the new boogeyman of this election cycle. Now, it's a whole lot easier to say that you're against DEI than to say I'm against diversity. They're still saying I'm against diversity, but it's a lot easier to say DEI, because that sounds a lot like dying, destruction, death. You don't want to say I'm against equity. Who the hell is against equity? That just sounds evil. But DEI, you take the humanity out of it. You don't want to say I'm against inclusion. The same thing. But when you're able to do this, which we're seeing conservatives do, and you keep repeating that same messaging over and over again, it covers up what they're actually saying. So what do they mean when they say they're against DEI efforts in schools and universities? It means they are pro-segregation. When you hear one of these commentators say or attacking DEI, or when you hear candidates like Ron DeSantis say we have to stop DEI, what they're really saying is we want to resegregate America. Because the only thing that actually desegregated America in the boardrooms and in the classrooms were quote unquote affirmative action efforts. That is what kind of the progeny of DEI comes from. It operates on this ideology that the only way to force organizations to change is to actually look at the diversity within their organizations. Then you put in an action plan by which you can achieve equity and you can achieve inclusion. Now, the way that it traditionally has worked in America is if you are a wealthy white landowner, which is where laws and rights were originally derived in America, then your children got to go to Ivy League schools because they were the child of a wealthy white landowner. And because of that, because he went to these elite schools and institutions, they got the best jobs in the country, not based on merit, not based on hard work, but just simply based on being the child or the grandchild or the great-grandchild of a wealthy white landowner. And this is how they pass down generational wealth. This is how they pass down and built these massive corporations. And once you have worked your way through the corporate system, through your name and through your family lineage, then you work your way into the political system based upon the same thing. And that's how you continue controlling the country, because now you can pass legislation that helps the other parts and the other people who are in a very similar situation to you to maintain this system of supremacy and privilege that exists. We know for a fact Anderson Cooper is on TV. He's a great reporter. He's a nice guy, but because his mother was Gloria Vanderbilt. Gloria Vanderbilt had a very successful apparel and jean company because she's a descendant of the Vanderbilt Railway family, the Carnegie Steel family, of those great robber barons of the late 18th and 19th century. This is just the reality that exists in this country. Tucker Carlson, great guy, been on the show many times, wonderful person. He's got a following, building his own network, etc. But his name is Tucker Swanson Carlson, as in part of the Swanson chicken broth family. And because of that, you have a level of wealth and opportunity and connections. That means when it comes down to who's going to be the 8 o'clock primetime anchor on any given network, one of them probably going to be the heir to the Vanderbilt fortune. One's probably going to be the heir to the chicken broth fortune of Swanson. For a time there, you had a Cuomo in there who's the heir to Andrew Cuomo's political dynasty. So are we really talking about needing merit? Are we really talking about people getting these jobs because of who they are and the hard work they put in? Or is it just so happens that the people who get these great positions come from rich and well-connected families? So what diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts were meant to do is start leveling this playing field. Let's start creating a feeder system. Let's make sure that we can get more black and brown students, more women and disabled and other minorities into these elite schools. Let's make sure that after they go to these elite schools, they actually have an opportunity to get a job. Let's make sure that after they have an opportunity to get a job, they actually have an opportunity to get a promotion and move into those positions. Somehow, this has become the new boogeyman for conservatives, and it's very clear why. As Mos Def said, you start keeping pace, they start switching up the tempo. It's not that diversity, equity, inclusion programs have not worked. The problem is they have worked too well. And once these individuals of wealth and privilege saw the inauguration of Barack Obama, they realized it had worked too well. Once they started seeing African-American senators, not just one every 20 or 30 years, but 2, 3, 4 of them showing up at the same time, they started getting concerned. When you start looking at the Supreme Court and you see a black woman, Ketanji Brown Jackson, you see a Latino woman, Sonia Sotomayor, you see a Jewish woman, Elaine Kagan, start saying to yourself, hey now, this isn't exactly what I bought in for. This isn't exactly what I thought we were getting. And even now, you're seeing on the corporate level, even though it's a minute number, you're starting to see more black CEOs of major corporations. If you look at the board of directors of any Fortune 500 company, you can pull it up right now, pull up what their board of directors looked like in the year 2000, and across the board, they were almost all white. I know because I pulled the data in 2000 to look at them. And if you look at them today, they're slowly but surely starting to look like America. And that is the fear that they have. We are in the last throes of late-stage white supremacy in this country. In the next decade or so, we're going to see America no longer be a majority-minority nation. Original predictions were there'll be somewhere around 2044. I've seen revised numbers say that it might be as soon as 2036 that America is no longer a majority-minority nation. And as a result of that, you're seeing these political parties and you're seeing these corporations, you're seeing the powers that be say, well, how can we hold on to what we have left of white privilege and white supremacy? And that's why they're attacking, quote unquote, DEI. Because they want to stop the advancement of African Americans, of women, of Latinos, of Arab Americans, of Muslims, of disabled people, and want to reestablish that system, that Mad Men system that we saw, when it was just middle-class white guys sitting around drinking scotch in the middle of the day, confident that they were there in that position just because they were the best and brightest and hardest workers in the world. But we've seen over and over again, the system just doesn't work. Donald Trump turned his corporation over to his children, not to the most qualified people, not to the kids who got the best grades, not to the person who worked their way up through the system and could best steward the company. He turned it over to his kids because it was his to do. He could do that. And now they're being sued for $250 million or $1 billion. He's going to be, his entire empire will crumble because he turned over the Trump Foundation, the Trump Organization, and all parts of his multi-billion-dollar empire to his children who were completely unqualified to run it. But yet and still, the people who are against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs will swear up and down that it's about merit-based work. Well, tell me why right now there's not an African-American male news anchor in prime time on any cable news network. Is there not one single African-American male who is qualified to do so? Or is it the opportunities are not presented? Well, Reverend Jackson always says that the thing about sports is, as long as the playing field is even, the rules are public and fair, the score is kept impartially, and the game is officiated correctly, we excel. The entire idea behind diversity, equity, and inclusion is to make sure that we level that playing field, not to tilt it one way or the other, not to discriminate against white people and make them feel like second-class citizens. It's about giving individuals the opportunity that their skin color and their birthright were never able to provide for them. And because it is working, conservatives are fighting against it. So you hear someone say they want to stop DEI. What they're saying is they want to resegregate America. They want to put you back in your place. They want you to be, well, you can be the sidekick, but I don't want you to be the star. You can be a contributor, but you can't be the main character in the story. And that's just as insidious as anything you would see out of Bull Connor or any other white racist segregationist from the 1960s. We'll talk more about this after the break. News and Talk 1380 WAOK.